first thing to say is that there were two things that happened yesterday. There were blockades of the opening of the new ECB tower block. Basically, the ECB, which used to be in Frankfurt for a long time, has built itself a new tower there, and they were going to open it with a lot of fanfare. And then the Blockupy coalition, which is a coalition of various left-wing and social justice groups, said, we are going to blockade your opening because there's nothing to celebrate. Like, they had a big party plan with lots of heads of state. And Blockupy said, there's nothing to celebrate given that the policies that you, the European Central Bank, are driving are leading to immiseration and impoverishment, especially in the European periphery, but all throughout the Eurozone. So we announced these blockades, and in response, actually, the ECB kind of scaled back their party plans and just sort of invited a few people to come. So there was, in fact, a bit of a success even of the announcement of our blockade. So that's what happened in the morning, and that's where you saw the major clashes that also produced the images you probably saw on TV. And then in the afternoon, there was a rally and a major march. And if there were maybe 5,000 or 6,000 at the blockades in the morning, the rally and the march gathered up to about 30,000 people. So those are kind of two sort of separate events. And the mood at the first event, the blockades, was definitely very confrontational. But the mood in the afternoon was very different. It was very colorful. It was sunny. Folks were there from all over the continent. There was a real sense of a Europeanization of the struggle from below against the austerity diktats from above.
Can you explain why the protest of the European Central Bank? Explain what are the concerns of those who are occupying, the protesters, the Blockupy group?
Right. So you have to imagine Europe or the Eurozone right now as a huge laboratory for austerity policies, which is the word we use in Europe to also to describe what maybe folks in other countries have called neoliberalism, or what for countries in the global south used to be called policies of structural adjustment. The Eurozone is being used by European elites to push back labor rights, all sorts of accomplishments of social movements of the last decades or even century. Everything is on the table in the Euro crisis, whether it's pensioners' rights, workers' rights, student rights, the right not to be evicted from your housing, health care. Everything is on the table for a sort of neoliberal offensive from the top. And in that, the countries of the European periphery in the south are suffering the most. Spain, Italy, Portugal, and especially Greece. Greece is essentially, since the Euro crisis hit or started, gone into what you might think of as receivership. They are no longer capable of drafting their own economic, social, etc. policies, but those policies are drafted by three institutions which used to be referred to as the Troika. That is the IMF, which we know from structural adjustment programs and others, the European Central Bank, and thirdly, the European Commission. Now, the ECB, the European Central Bank, is a key node in this Troika, and the Troika is the institution which has essentially evacuated Greek democracy. When the Greeks voted for a different government, Syriza, an anti-austerity government, a few months ago, it became very clear that European elites had a fight on their hands. Whereas for many years it seemed that they were able to push these austerity projects from the top without much coordinated resistance, or without resistance that managed to occupy certain levers of power. When on the 25th of January, the Greek people voted for an anti-austerity government for the first time, which at this point enjoys 70 to 80% support in the Greek population, in spite of being in a very difficult situation. When this new government, this new hope, came to power in Greece, European elites realized now they had a real fight on their hands, and they've been trying to strangle this new hope in Greece ever since. And this is why the protests at the European Central Bank yesterday were so tense and also filled with rage, because on the one hand you had this supposedly grandiose opening of a new institution that says, hey, we're the sort of pinnacle of European integration and of European capitalism. And at the same time, you've got this massive assault on social movements, on workers in the entire entire Eurozone, and especially the European periphery, and there foremost Greece. And that's essentially the connection that drove folks yesterday in large numbers to come and protest and blockade the ECB in Frankfurt.
And so in this last minute we have left, Tadzio, explain what happened, the people who were injured and also the cars that were set afire.
Okay, now there were these blockades, and it is true that folks from the blockades were clearly out to engage the police. And I think we can say that it's understandable why there is this rage. If you look at Greece, you've got youth unemployment of 50%, you've got increase in suicides. It's a terrible situation, and folks in Europe were trying to express their rage at the evacuation of democracy on the continent. However, expressing rage is not the same as having a political strategy to change the things that are actually causing the suffering that is causing your rage. So I'd say there was a lot of rage in the street in the morning, but in the afternoon and evening that had been transformed into a sense of hope, into a sense that we can lead a European struggle from below against these institutions and maybe win. So my hope would be, let's not just focus on the burning cars, because in fact what we need to focus on is the ECB and their policies, because they're burning the continent.